Okay, so we're live again. I think we have most people back.
We'll be missing Sharon just for a little bit, I think probably until about 1:30 or so we can go ahead and keep moving.
Okay, if you're okay, that's okay with us, but I mean, honestly, if you would rather wait for her, we can all use the time, I guess, but we're ready to go if you want to.
Why don't we keep things moving forward? She just had to attend to something kind of last minute, but
Of course.
she'll join us when she's able to.
Absolutely. Brian, as I mentioned before the live stream was back on, I sent over a copy of the articles. Article 7. Article 7 would be a counter to the district's Article 7, and we then sent a counter to your counter, I guess, counter to the last presentation on overages that the district sent. So you get to pick what you want first. Pick a card.
Well, why don't you start with the middle Article 7? Are you
sure.
referencing middle school piece?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I can see it perfectly clearly, but none of you can. Hold on. Ta-da! Everybody have that? Okay. Yeah. Article 7. We're not. We thought it was going to be. This is not a criticism. We thought you were coming with a sort of plan for the middle school, and we understand that there was a lot going on, and you were looking for freedom. We understood all those things, and the one that seemed to give that the area that you needed to address was the issue of planning time. And the way you expressed it as the district was that you were looking to have the planning time match, particularly in the K-8s, so that the day was the same. We looked at it and we thought that having middle school's day match the elementary was less appropriate than having the middle school match the high school. So with that in mind, I mean, we didn't want to make it right now I'm going to get this wrong, but I think 590 minutes in high school is what the planning time currently is. We didn't want to make it an unattainable thing. We thought about the flow of the day, at least as in schools as they currently are, and Thea will be able to talk to the way, different time is carved out in her work week, which is a sort of one of the more traditional middle school models. But we were saying, because of the change of periods and everything else, it should match that, so that we originally did not less than 420 minutes per standard work week for the middle schools. But then we thought about the problem of now you've got, just like, and we don't mean this, take it for what it is. What our idea is we do recognize that the K-8 is a strange animal, particularly when it has it's strange not just because of the wide range of students attending the building, but then what also happens is you have staff that are operating, as you pointed out, on two entirely different schedules in the way their day flows. So we're suggesting that with that in mind, and we thought about, is this 420 minutes a doable thing in the current elementary schools? And we think it is. So that would bring uniformity to the K-8s. This proposal makes the middle school closer to the high school, which is appropriate, we think. It's hard. It was hard for us to think about this without knowing all of the different elements and concepts that the district has when it comes to shaping a middle school. We're not really, we're not sure why. We know that I know, Brian, you were saying 320 minutes. You didn't, you were looking to increase the 320 minutes. We actually were coming that it's, in some cases, less than people are getting. Not everywhere, but in some buildings, yes. So, there we are with that proposal. So questions we're open to answering or discussing.
Sure. I mean, I think I have. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Lisa.
Oh, no. I was just going to ask, I see how y'all inserted there shall be at least one daily block of planning time, no less than the length of one standard class period. I was wondering if you could talk through your thinking there, and with this in mind. Part of why we wanted to move to the weekly standard is to try and shift away from minimal changes that might impact the length of a period at a middle school, impacting the teacher's planning time, essentially. And so that was what was really attractive to us of modeling that provision like it is in elementary, where we agree on what the minimum time has to be, but it doesn't reference the length of period, which might change. We know our middle schools have all sorts of different schedules. So I was wondering if you could talk me through
that. Generally speaking, the difference between the middle and the elementary is that the periods change in the elementary, whereas students don't change. Excuse me, periods change in the middle and high school, and they don't in the elementary school. And so the blocks of instruction are sort of defined along those terms. So traditionally, that's been why it is. I guess in general, what we didn't want to see was, 400 1-minute prep periods, right? So it's not that we, the idea to the game is to sort of, we were looking, if the district wants to make it a 58-minute planning class period, maybe then it's a 58-minute, but we're open to ideas on that. The response was because we weren't really sure about how this, it's hard to get a sense because we're not really positive of the degree of flexibility and what you guys actually have in mind. We're not really sure of that. So it's hard to let go of that concept, but we're open. I mean, literally, we know this is an open discussion in a sense. It's almost like a proposals with an IBB framework. It's kind of a, odd way to do this, but at the same time, we're comfortable doing it with you guys. If you have a particular concept for the middle school that you have in mind that you're trying to have fit within something like that, we're not against it. We'd be interested in hearing it.
Yeah, I think that, so I don't think that we have a particular schedule that we want to talk about implementing across the board right now. And that's because we're going to be beginning the middle school redesign process, just coming up.
Right.
But I do have an example that I could talk through that springs to mind that might be helpful for us. So if you have a school that that's interested in moving to a block schedule, now I'm no school schedule expert, so I probably will say many words, use words in the wrong way. But say you have a middle school that's interested in moving to a block schedule, which will shift the period length to 88 minutes or something like that, like let's say 80 minutes. And the goal is in no way to lessen the planning time that any educator has, but that is a very different period length than we're typically used to having, right? And so that was where we thought, how can we make this so that schools, that the educators, the students, and the administrators can work on their schedules the way they want to, right? And make shifts that they think are improvements without it necessarily being that it would result in a reduction of planning time, I guess is what I mean.
Yeah,
so
no, I think I get you. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So by agreeing, like, okay, so there has to be a block of 40 minutes or whatever the number is, right? We can move away from it being tied to the period, which a school might want to. We know that we have many schools that educators want to be able to adjust the length of the period for whatever reason.
Okay. And I know, Elizabeth, you've spent a lot of time working in Elizabeth, you're on this, right? Elizabeth has spent a lot of time working in middle schools and actually working on middle school curriculum design and building design or schedule design. So Elizabeth and Thea, you're the two middle school folks you want to address?
Yeah, I mean, I think we know that you came to this saying that there was a middle school redesign in the works, and that's what we were going to be bargaining. And so it feels like a little bit like we don't know what the animal is that we're dealing with. So thanks for the example. And I think, our interest is making sure that middle school educators are not losing planning time. It's essential. And I think if you look, and there is inequity right now in our district about how much planning time people get. And I am quite confident that places where people get more planning time, it feels more successful and more supportive, and people feel like they're better able to meet students' needs because of it. So we certainly would not want to be moving towards like the worst case scenario that we have. We want to be bringing everybody into the models, the things that are currently working well, like we want to go in that direction. So I appreciate putting in the number of minutes a week, because I think it is a lot clearer to create like equitable planning time across our schools. So totally appreciate that, and want to make sure that there's a meaningful way to make sure that during the workday, educators have an opportunity to prepare their classes. So I think we're open to understanding what your interest is and what you're trying to make room to happen, so that we can work together to find a way to do that and ensure that educators get the time they need to do their jobs.
And I can jump in and say, I, as a middle school teacher, would be open to having a specific amount of time, continuous minute. I mean, we need a big continuous minutes to plan and grade and all the millions of other things we do. But the idea of doing a block schedule, and then I would only have, having 40 minutes of a day, that sounds like maybe we'd be either given another class, or we might be given other duties within that time. Like if I'm promised only 40 minutes and my class periods are 56 minutes, then does that mean that a principal can assign me a duty or give me another task to do during the time that's sort of left over? So I think that was part of the concern with why we went ahead and reverted back to our daily standard class period.
And Lisa could correct me if I'm wrong, or I know Sean has been working on this too. I don't think, Thea, to your point, where there was like a 53-minute period or something, I think when we wrote the language, there's at least one daily block of planning time of at least 40 minutes. I think what we were anticipating was that language would be satisfied by that 53-minute prep period. That probably wasn't the issue. I think it was more like what Lisa was talking about. If you went to a block type of a format where you had 80-minute periods, for example, then potentially you would use part of that 80-minute period for something other than planning. So it wasn't so much to get at those ones that were 48 minutes or 53 minutes or something like that and say, hey, we're going to use 13 minutes now for another reason. I think it was mostly that block scenario. Is that correct, Lisa?
That's right.
Yeah, I think that's right. But I mean, I do think that that even just the fact that we have schools that have 48 and then 49 and then 56, I mean, that's not uniform. And so by tying this to the period length, I think that it would be more uniform and fair to have it be one number.
Yeah, I hear that actually, Lisa. That's an interesting point. Historically, when we look back over disputes and records that we have in the office, at one point the middle schools were all running essentially the same schedule, or darn close to it. And then all of a sudden there was I don't know what in the world happened, but there was some wild drift where, as you mentioned, different schools began instituting different things. And you're right that the length of the period language kind of enabled that, which I certainly know it was not the intention of the association when they crafted it, because it was a uniform schedule, but it's become what that is. So maybe having a block of time that's set rather than a length of period accomplishes that. And we did ask last time, but the idea is that the block of time is within the student day, correct? In other words, the elementary model has it before or after the students are there. That's what I was asking, and the answer was no, it would be within the student day, but that is the approach of the district, right?
Correct.
Yeah, in the middle school, it would be like their prep period. So it would be during the student time.
Gotcha.
Well, and again, that kind of goes back to what I was saying to Thea, that in the majority of schedules, it's going to end up being a prep period the same way you have that now. I think the block was the one exception.
Right. Okay.
And I think last time maybe Elizabeth asked a question, what was our intention here? Was it not to decrease planning time, or was it to at least keep it equal or increase? And I think sometimes prep time's an interesting one to talk about, because there's almost two different kind of prep time worlds. There's what you're guaranteed in the contract. And in this case, the contract says one standard class period a day. So read technically, if I'm on a 53-minute class period, what the contract guarantees me in a week, 53 is 265 minutes. I mean, that's my contractual guaranteed prep time. And then, so we really saw our 320 as being in excess of what any schedule we saw contractually provided for in the way of prep time. I know that
and I'm sorry. No, and Brian, I hear where I get it now, and I'm sorry, I don't mean just yes, there are like 53 minutes or 56 minutes or whatever the case may be, but remember that there's an additional hour of planning time guaranteed every teacher at the end of not a full hour each day, but 15 minutes, 4 days a week.
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, yeah. So that's where we were saying, like, actually the 320 is in fact less than the vast majority of buildings that when we were thinking of it in the middle school level. In some cases by 5 minutes, in other cases with the 56 ones by a fairly sizable chunk.
So that's 60 minutes. That's 60 minutes a week, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it'd be 325 or like 340. 340.
That's
I
what I
think.
got in my building.
Yes.
340, Thea?
And in addition to that, there is 30 minutes a day that happens outside of the student day, usually before school, that has, at the time that our language was created, one period it was time that educators also used to prepare. It wasn't marked as planning time on the schedule, but it was part of that maintenance of workload and working conditions that it has been at the time that this language was written was understood to be at educators' discretion how to use that time. And so, and it was only recent years that PPS has tried to allocate that time to other things, and it has been a conflict.
Yeah, I mean, I can see why it's been a conflict. I've helping manage contracts for a long time, and I think we've always considered that you have a contractual prep time guarantee, and if a district happens to exceed that guarantee in a given year, that doesn't move the contractual standard up. It's not you must maintain whatever minimum level. I mean, I've got contracts that probably say 300 minutes of, and maybe your experience is like this too, I don't know, 300 and some minutes at elementary, and in reality, in many weeks, people get like 500 minutes. Maybe there's not many meetings in a given week. That doesn't mean that the district is now and forever obligated to give that 500 minutes a week of prep time. We've bargained the issue to completion, the issue being planning time, and this is what we've arrived at. And so that's why I say bargaining prep time because I hear what you're saying, Elizabeth, and we hear that a lot, like, yeah, but in reality, I get X much planning time. At least from my perspective, that's not guaranteed planning time. That's on a practical level, how much you end up getting, but the contract is what sets that standard. I'm not trying to rehash what it sounds like you guys have had disagreements in this area or have had discussions about it. I haven't been involved in those. I'm not trying to rehash those, but I'm just trying to explain when we looked at what our proposal was doing middle school prep time. John, you're right. I didn't factor in the 60 minutes in what I was in that calculation when I came up with 265. So you would have to add that to it as well. We saw that 320, and maybe we missed by a few minutes to make sure that it wasn't an actual reduction in contractual guaranteed prep time compared to what anybody's getting now. So that may have been true.
Right. Can I speak to that a little bit? Because what you're saying is like that time that has been kind of unidentified but was agreed upon as like educator discretion time, that like if we're not considering that, I feel like at some point we do need to go back and consider when this language was bargained, the average length of a middle school middle school period. So middle school periods used to be 60 minutes, 62 minutes. So, so they were these larger chunks of time, and the district has dwindled those away in different ways to get down to these 56, 54s, in some buildings even lower. But if we're going back to when this language was negotiated and we're thinking about 60-minute planning periods, 60 times 5, like it's just, and even above that, when they used to be 62 or 64-minute periods, and then you add that additional 60 minutes at the end of the day, we're significantly higher than the number that you guys are using.
I mean, it's Charity, a couple of times the words agreed upon have been used. To me, when it comes to planning time, the things that have been agreed upon are those that show up in the contract. That is, to me, that's what's been agreed upon. It's what the parties bargained, and it's what is reflected in the contract language. So I don't know what you mean when you say agreed upon. What I know is agreed upon is the contract language itself.
Well, Brian, I know this is not the purpose of this discussion, but I mean, and I appreciate what you're saying. And yes, in vast majority of the contracts, what you're saying is absolutely correct. We also have the provision that says the workload shall be no more than blank year.
Sure.
And that led to a number of arbitrations, and I think Fernwood, I mean, you've heard me mention that a couple of times, and I know that Lisa's probably sick of hearing it, but Fernwood did talk to about that unidentified time in the day that middle school teachers have, and how can that be used in a K-8 building. And what the arbitrator said was, look, obviously it's not planning time, and it's not assigned time either. It's some sort of a magic block of time, but it's for teachers to get work done. And so, here's the thing, you can do this, but you can't use it as assigned time district. So that was the case, and whenever we find out about it, I mean, much of this change, Brian, in the middle school schedules have come with a drift in what we talked about this morning of the contract exception. It's been, in this building, we want to try this program, and we want to do this, it's been this long history and difficult for both sides to track. But it does have an actual meaning, that time period. It was, and actually arbitrated, and it is supposed to be non-assigned time. So
I think one thing that this conversation does do, hopefully that's productive, is demonstrate why a weekly total number of minutes is advantageous. Because Charity, I hear you saying, period used to be this amount, and then it moved down to this amount. As the contract reads right now, you have to know the length of a given period to know what the prep time is, right?
Yes.
I think that having a number of minutes, a weekly number of minutes, solves that issue at least.
I agree with you, Brian. I mean, I'm not agreeing officially for the team here, but point well taken, and we hear you.
Yeah, I just don't know that it's 420, and I hear the rationale as to why you shifted the elementary. I mean, obviously, elementary prep time was not a topic that we had brought forward. We did bring forward the desire to have K-8 schools, not have differentiation. So, that's one of the reasons that we had pinned the middle school number on 320.
Yeah, and that's the reason. For that very reason, that's the purpose, as I was trying to indicate. We know it was not the topic, but it became sort of, oh, I get it. And if you want uniformity, we hear you, and we agree it probably should be. And so that's, we're just responding to it as to what we think the way it should go. But you are right.
Well,
we're not, yeah, we're really trying to, if that was your idea to have a schedule that worked in a K-8 across the whole thing, that meant that we get that that would be both sets of educators working on the same general construct for the day. And that would mean a change in the elementary school planning.
I don't have any other questions or thoughts. Lisa or Sean, do you have, or anybody on our team for that matter? I know that Lisa, you had been working on this one quite a bit. Any other questions?
Nope.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, sure. The other document that I sent over to you was a response to the district overages, which, am I putting this up here correctly? Hold on. And so with that, if you're ready, here we go. So here is the our response to the district's proposal on this. We gave it let me just start before I begin with anything else, housekeeping and everything else. We tried to say, well, what is the actual numbering system going to be with all of this? And we began to change the numbering system and then just like, oh, this is silly. Why am I even trying this? So not only was a formatting drag, but it also, we realized it was going to actually change a few times before this is all over. So please, we're not suggesting any sort of substantive changes to anything except the language that's changed. The numbers were just an attempt to indicate that they would have to change also. So I hope you get where I'm coming from on that. But so here's what we have. We were thinking about your response, and Sharon, I think, you were the one who was talking about how difficult it is to track, for the district to be able to track all of these things. And to do it on a monthly basis was just was not really a capable thing. Plus the district needed to have space and time to be able to make changes, and we get it. Our interest, as we explained to you, was that if you are an educator and you've taught the child for half a semester and a week before the snapshot, a child is removed from your classroom, you receive zero compensation. Similarly, if in a 2-week period you did not have an overage and a child is shifted to your caseload or class size, you now do not receive an overage because it was after the snapshot date. Neither one of those seemed fair or appropriate, and but we did recognize that so we were trying to address it with the monthly. We hear that that's not going to work for you. So what we've done is we suggested this as a sort of quarterly approach, so to speak. It's hard to nail down dates, but you'll see our concept as I walk through the language here. So what we're suggesting is the student, a snapshot is taken 10 days after the start of the school year on the 3rd Monday in October, 10 days after the start of the 2nd semester, and on the last student day prior to spring break. And that if a professional educator can show during those quarterly blocks, they would do that by saying, here's my official class load and my official class list. These are the kids I'm serving, right? Not class load, but also caseload, obviously. Sorry for speaking loosely there. But if they can show that they would get the sort of, and we've suggested that the pay, instead of being 1.5% of the 3%, half of the 3%, we're suggesting this in quarterly blocks of, in other words, 0.75 of the base salary per half semester. Again, we think that this does help the district because it sets things up so that people are paid actually closer to what they're actually working. You don't have someone who receives payment because a student left their roles 1 day after the snapshot. So you're paying for a whole semester, and you also don't have people who have the work and aren't getting compensated for it. It seemed beneficial on both sides. When we made that change, we recognized we had gone back and forth over this, and we tried to find some way, but we realized that the sort of ways to address this, if we did it on a quarterly basis, this doesn't mean that the district can't move students. Of course, the district can move students, but these were remedies to it because they were in only half semester blocks, and there was no way to capture that half year blocks. And there was no way to capture any change. So this was what was taking place. With what we've suggested in the first paragraph, these become unnecessary. That doesn't mean you can't do balancing, and it doesn't mean you can't, assign anybody to do anything. But like in the paraprofessionals or in the EA situation, but we didn't think that it functioned really as a remedy to the workload. We had said that it would be paid in a, each monthly paycheck. That wouldn't be necessary at this point because obviously it doesn't apply. So we left the language as it was. We agree with you that 3.2, 4, and 5 were unchanged. The district proposal of no educator shall receive more than $8,000. That's really a problem for us. The whole idea was that, allow me to say it again, for the 9 millionth time, we don't want anybody getting $1, let alone $8,000, period. Both sides stated and gave to a comment to the press and everything else that the goal is that no one will ever receive an overage pay. These should be rare if they happen at all. And it's not working out that way. And we have some educators who are receiving, and I'll be frank about it, I mean, we don't want them receiving the size of overage payment that they're receiving. At the same time, we don't want the district to continually violate the concept of the overage the same way in multiple years. In some cases, it's the same educators. It is shocking to me that the district would knowingly find itself in a situation where somebody received that level of overage that they're receiving and then throw up their hands and say, well, too bad, we're going to continue to do it. So what we've suggested is that should this rare moment come up where an educator receives $8,000 and you notice it, that will stop immediately. The district will do whatever it takes to change that, because that is an insane, as Steve pointed out in conversation to me, Steve, you came up with, it was essentially, what was it? The workload of,
well, if it's going over $8,000, then this person's now a 1.2 FTEs worth of work, and it just becomes an unsustainable amount of work for any one human being. So no one should be receiving those massive overage payments, because it's just way more than any human could reasonably do.
And we're well aware, Brian, this is, and probably Sharon, this is to the two of you, and Lisa, I guess, in HR, the three of you most directly, we understand that this is getting to the concept of a cap. We're not trying to make this a cap, but we also want to make sure that the overage, the spirit of the overage, which is no one should receive one, we agree with. We think both sides agree to it. And we think that if an educator winds up getting $8,000, it's because something went radically wrong, and both sides agree that it will not happen. We don't think that's too hard to agree to. To that, we've changed this. And of course, this would flow through, we have your footnote here and we get it. We changed the 0.75, but yes, these changes would run appropriately through each one of these blocks. We then came down to the idea of speech language pathologists, the transition teachers in the CTP, sorry, stumbled on that, program. And then, as you remember, all the way down to the ESL, ELL. And so we might as well start with the CTP programs. Your comment that, you reached out to the administrators and they met with their staff, and this is what they think is what people agree to. we were surprised to hear it, and we reached out to the people who were in that meeting. Charity, you were the one who collected those emails, but you know, you'll give the details, Charity, but let me just say absolutely as emphatically as I can, that is not accurate. They did not agree. This is not what the staff thought they were agreeing to or commenting on. We don't know where this came from, other than the administrators there. So Charity, what did they respond to you?
Yeah, so and the emails are pouring in all day as they're sending me more and more information about the types of students that they're supporting in each team 1, team 2, team 3, and then the discussion through the staff meeting on what were appropriate caseloads for students in those programs. And so it does seem really complicated. Again, as we talked about on Wednesday, I think without having any written definition of what team 1, team 2, team 3 is, like, this just is an unrealistic set of expectations to begin with. But team 1, the discussion was around 10 was an appropriate case load. There are students in, if you are a team 1 student, a lot of the students that you're serving have medical and toileting protocols, one-on-one supports, line of sight. Some have equipment like wheelchairs or behavior support plans, seizure protocols. They're needing a lot of support and a lot of accommodations. So that they feel like that mirrors much more the intensity level of students that are in the Pioneer program, which has an overage chart number of 10. Team 2, the discussion was around 17 or 18. So the CTP teachers were shocked to see this number of 23 as being presented. And team 3 was, the discussion in the staff meeting was around caseloads of 25. And we're hearing, yeah, so it's a complicated situation. The students in the CTP program have greatly varying needs. And one of the things that I think is most concerning that's in one of the emails was this concept of being identified as a 1.5. So we can't have like having discussions about team 1, team 2, team 3 without clear definitions, and then try to categorize people as something that actually doesn't exist anyways. Like, that's going to create a big challenge. So 10, 17 or 18 and 25.
And of course, we need clear definitions of what constituted how team 1 is formed, how team 2 is formed, and how team 3 is formed. You know, is team 2, if you have 10 students who are of a team 1 level, does it become a team 2 if you then add another 7 level 2 in there? Because, I mean, you know, that doesn't make any sense. So we need to have a real sense of how these things would be determined. So, I mean, we're not, before we start to get to a definitive number and sticking with what the staff thought they were agreeing to, we'd love to hear how the district is talking about what constitutes team 1, you know, an actual definition for each one of these, and how the interplay between the different levels would work out.
Yeah, and
oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to answer to that real fast. I'm working on gathering some information. I think we're all probably scrambling, so I've been doing some virtual conversations. I wasn't part of the initial conversation that identified these numbers, and this isn't my area of expertise, but just after hearing you, Charity, I'm trying to gather some data on how many students who are level or team 1 students are students who come from Pioneer versus an ISD classroom, because I also want to be really conscious of the fact that we have folks who are working with really complex students, K-12, and they have these 13 student thresholds. And so I would really hate to divert resources from a program where students haven't had the benefit of years and years of education to create lower class sizes for adults. So that's just like, you know, me speaking for myself off the cuff without checking on this data.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, and we'll be, thank you for collecting that data. We honestly, not just for the clarity in the comments, but actually doing the work for collecting the data, because it's hard to assign a number to it and not know what we're assigning. So
Yeah, for sure.
thanks. The speech language pathologist, we reached out, of course, to the speech language pathologist group and asked what they thought of the numbers. And you can see that, you know, what they were saying was, originally the number was supposed to be, well, okay, what's the sort of midpoint of all of the different levels? But if we're going to break it out, they said they're not against breaking it out. But if that's the case, the workload should reflect the differences, clearly the differences between the two types of levels. And so they're suggesting 45 and 55, which we agree with. And
John, and recategorizing middle school as being in the same category as K-5.
Yes.
Versus categorized with high school.
yes, I'm sorry. That's my Scrivener there. I should have put that in bold and underlined. I crossed it out here, but when I put it in the other one, I didn't indicate it. Pardon me for that. So, I mean, if you want,
please
I can
ignore the typo of it. There's a typo of 55 students written into the elementary counselor's cell there, which is just a copying error.
Okay. Yep. Excuse. Oh, yes. Pardon me. This is what he's talking about, and that's a mistake. Pardon me.
Sorry, John, do we also are countering on when the threshold is triggered?
Yes, which is, I thought that would be clear here. We were in the high school, you had said that it would be 1.5% each semester per 5 students over the threshold. And the speech pathologist said, and we agree, we don't understand the distinction, it's inappropriate. And so we're suggesting the same as in the elementary and middle school, that it's per student. And then ESL and ELL, I believe, I think 50 was the number that PPS proposed. Is that accurate? I don't mean to mischaracterize this, but we had 45. We're willing to go 50, but the idea of having it be lumped in, you know, the DLI teachers are, Steve, do you mind characterizing this? Because the email came to you primarily, I was copied on it, but we were immediately contacted by some of the educators who work in this area and listened to bargaining from the last session. So Steve, do you want to?
I'm getting internet connection unstable messages, so I'm not sure that I'm the best one to talk at this moment.
I can maybe speak to it, John, if you want to.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, so there was a lot of concerns around some of the discussion on Wednesday. You guys had stated 56 and not including the non-DLI, not including the DLI students. And there was instant and intense feedback on that. So the amount of support that students are needing and the amount of consultation. So if a gen ed teacher is providing some of the services, there is still the responsibility for the testing components, the monitoring progress, the working and supporting the gen ed teacher in order to be able to provide those English language services. And there was also great concern around the idea that the staffing of the educational assistants. So they were talking about the intensity of language needs that students are coming in with, either newcomers or students with interrupted formal education across at all levels. So not just at the elementary level, but that when students come, they have an intense level of need, and that needs to be, it can be supported by an educational assistant, but the instruction and the skill development coming from the ELL teachers is critical. And so those two pieces, like we reinserted the newcomer and students with interrupted formal education language and took out we think DLI students absolutely need to be counted in their caseload. And then the number at 50 was an increase for us, but one that feels yeah, high, but felt like it met you in the middle.
I did want to share that I'm excited that Tanya is joining us this afternoon, because I do think it's possible that some lines got crossed on our team about how the DLI students overlapped with ESL services.
Okay.
And so rather than try and go into it right now when those same lines might get crossed, I'd love it if we could talk about it when she joins.
Okay, fair enough.
Some more specifics
there,
on that one. Yeah.
Sorry, Lisa. Are there other, I mean, I'm leaving it up here and not ending screen share only because if you have other questions, I can refer to the language. But if you let me know, and if everything's clear, I can end the screen share and we can go on with the discussion or whatever is necessary. So.
I don't have any specific questions. I probably don't know this language as in depth as Lisa and Sharon and others. So I don't know if you guys have additional questions, but I don't, for speaking for myself.
I don't know if you all can hear me or not, but
Yes, we can.
I appreciate that there'll be someone from the district with some deeper ESL background to be able to talk to us about it. We, as a bargaining team, do not have an ESL specialist with us on the team to be able to most eloquently speak to the ESL issues. And depending on what we hear from you this afternoon, we may want to try to bring one of those folks in for the next bargaining session to be able to better address those issues.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, we're bringing somebody in, who's kind of an expert. So hardly would say, no, you shouldn't do that on on your behalf.
Okay. Okay, so I think that covers the response to the and thanks for getting those things over to us, Lisa. I really appreciate it. I also want to be clear in this. You sent over the issues on Article 9, the handbook, and something else. I forget what else. And as the fact that I forget it is an indication that I have not even had 5 seconds to really look at it in any way. I mean, I opened them and downloaded them, and I have with the other bargain and Wednesday, I haven't even had a moment to go through it. So, but I appreciate that, and I know Elizabeth is looking at it, and we'll be able to address that as soon as we get a moment.
Sounds good.
So I know that we have some individuals who are going to be joining on specific topics. I had thought, one thing that I had thought is that you had some questions on the acceleration schools proposal that we had made. And so I didn't know if we wanted to turn to that or if I was mistaken that you had questions that you were wanting on that piece.
We do have a number of questions. We wanted to make sure that everyone on the team, spoke to the areas that they felt passionate's the wrong term, but most clearly had a question about. And so we just would need a little bit of time to be able to say, okay, does anyone feel strongly about the questions in section 2, number 3, that sort of thing. So, but we have those ready to go.
Okay. And Lisa, your camera's off, so just not sure if you're needing to get to something else. Can somebody remind me what our timing is for those other folks today, just so I have that in my head?
We have 2, 2:30, and 3.
Oh, 2.
And I would love to be able to, I'd like to propose that we take a caucus. I'd prefer to be able to greet our guests in
Sure.
caucus first and then bring them over. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks.
What do you think time-wise, Lisa?
2:10, 2:05, 2:10.
Why don't we say 2:10, just to be on the safe side?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that way you don't have to do what I did to you, which is keep extending it.
Yeah.
And if you do need to extend it, we understand. And I guess also
Okay.
we will spend some of the time thinking about, who takes what slot for the afternoon. We figured at the end of the afternoon, we'd be able to, we're not trying to, stump the panel, but we figured some of the questions really wouldn't have answers that you're ready to give now because they will take some time to either think about or come to a collective response. So we figured what we do is just for timing's sake for the day, ask that at the end of the day, run through that then.
That makes sense.
But if you're ready, I wasn't thinking it was 2:00. So yeah, why don't we go to the other presentations you have, and then when they're done, we can go to the section on accelerated schools.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. See you back here.
Sure. All right, see you then.